Today is October 21st, 2011. We're doing an oral history interview for the archives here at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. I'm Charles Lundquist. Our guest today is Professor Carroll Johnson. He's a distinguished professor of electrical and computer engineering, get that straight. But he's also been a very long time member of the university community. But good to have you, Carroll.
Thank you, Chuck. Glad to be here.
We usually start out by letting people tell where they were born, where they're from, and how they eventually got to Huntsville.
Okay. Born in Topeka, Kansas, 1934. Eventually ended up in Memphis, Tennessee. Grew up in Memphis during Elvis period, Elvis generation. And went to UT Knoxville. Got my degrees at UT Knoxville, BS, MS engineering. Then I came to Memphis, back to Memphis, taught at Pitcher Brothers College in Memphis, Tennessee for 2 years. Then applied for National Science Foundation Science Faculty Fellowship. Won that. Went to Purdue University. Was there from 1961 to 63. Earned my PhD in 63. Had a lucrative offer to come to Huntsville from a new national endeavor to build a space rocket. So trip to the moon. I was hired by the professor who was chair of electrical engineering at UA campus in Tuscaloosa. And our assignment was to come to Huntsville and do whatever von Braun wants us to do in way of teaching his personnel. Advanced control theory, advanced rocket theory, and so forth. I was very lucky at that time to be here right when the Research Institute was being introduced and opened up. Dr. Rudolph Herman, one of my early contacts here. And so that pretty well brings you up to date.
Well, what can you remember, or what would you like to say about those early days? Particularly the Research Institute.
Very exciting. None of us knew what we were actually going to be doing. Dr. von Braun had told us, don't teach from the book. The books say we can't do what we're trying to do here. So don't teach from the books. And we want to teach beyond the books. So we all had to adjust our attitude about teaching to teach beyond the book, and it was very, very challenging. I was impressed with Dr. Herman when I met him first time. He was very ambitious about the Research Institute and what his job was here, to build a research institute to support the Saturn launch vehicle design project. And he was very, very aggressive to hire people in various areas of fluid dynamics and instrumentation and so forth, to build an institute that would provide all the support needed to assure the Saturn program would be successful. Instrumentation and gyroscopes, things like that.
Can you think of any particular contributions that the early staff here made to the lunar program and the rocket program?
I cannot pinpoint anything in particular. Dr. Herman was always bringing in people from the arsenal to see the work we were doing. I was doing control theory on the Saturn, what they call the minimax bending stress problem. How to minimize the maximum bending stress in a missile during launch, and the downrange drifting due to strong winds at the launch site. We introduced what we call Chebyshev minimax control theory, a brand new field. And
that was actually used on the vehicle?
They were talking about, I don't know if they actually used it or not. Dr. Holker had a drift minimum principle, which he was advocating very strongly, and whether they used some combination of both of them, I just don't know for sure.
Sure, had lots of young students from the arsenal and from the space program.
Yes, we did. That was our main purpose, the state funded the whole operation here to support the Army Missile Command at that time, and also the Marshall Space Flight Center requirements. We had a number of young students in the Army and also NASA.
Who were some of your colleagues that were around then?
Well, there weren't a whole lot. When I came here in 1963, I was joined by Dr. Poles from University of Cincinnati, I believe it was. And he and I, the two of us, doubled the staff of engineering at that time. There were a couple more came in a couple of years later. Dr. Tinsby Oden, people like that. He turned out to be one of the godfathers of finite element technique, and a very, very, very well-known gentleman now at the University of Texas. There were a number of people who were very, very young and eager to make a name for themselves, and this was an ideal place to do that. They got involved real quick with the space program, doing contract research through the RI building, RI Institute.
Well, following the early RI days, the university grew and became an autonomous institution, and you lived through all that and participated in it. Do you have any recollections about that whole process?
Well, we began teaching a graduate program here. We were a branch campus of the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and so we were exclusively assigned to Huntsville, the graduate program in Huntsville. And so we had a master's degree program to begin with. Then we went down to a bachelor's degree as the years went by. And we went up to a PhD degree. So we sort of built the program backwards, so to speak, starting in the middle and going down and going back up. But eventually we had a full-fledged program here, BS program, master's program, PhD program. And many of the later big decision makers at Marshall turned out to be graduates of our program. We were very proud of them.
You dealt with a large number, I guess, of deans of engineering. Any thoughts on all that?
Almost a new dean every year. Almost a new president every year for a while there. Well, they weren't all called presidents. They were called campus directors at one time. One of them told me one time that his job was to keep Huntsville from growing too fast.
Is that right?
Huntsville campus from growing too fast. He was keeping the lid on the kettle, so to speak. Yeah, we had some very good people come along during those years. They each made a contribution. We were a growing campus, maturing, and again, it was a very different environment than the ordinary campus environment. Almost all of our students were working full-time at Marshall Space Flight Center or the Army, and so they'd come to the campus after work at 4:30 in the afternoon and take one or two courses. It was a very unusual environment.
You've had some PhD students,
yes.
Sure. Any of them?
The first one was Dr. Kelly Grider from the Army Missile Command, and he turned out to be one of their top-notch people as years went by.
Yes, I knew him.
Yes, still very, very active.
Yeah, but others?
Let's see, who else? I didn't prepare for all these names.
But this is informal. Don't worry about it.
But Jim Blair was another one.
Oh, yes.
He was one of the designers of the shuttle.
Yes, Jim
Blair was very
a leading
and
manager and scientist at Marshall. Yes.
And let's see, who else?
Don't worry. I understand you have going to an exam of some student this afternoon.
Oh, yes. This is somebody else's graduate.
Oh, someone else, and you're just on the committee. Yeah. All right. So it's not one of your students.
Yeah. I do have one coming up, though.
Good.
I have a number of PhDs coming up.
Well, how do you evaluate UAH compared to other universities in this?
It's become very attractive. People are just looking forward to coming down here and visiting the campus now. It's very, very different than it was in the beginning. We've matured enough to be very attractive across the country. And of course, Huntsville has grown in its federal presence, federal lab presence, become a very, very attractive campus to be teaching on.
And as you've seen Huntsville grow from a small cotton town to a significant city.
Watercress capital of the world to a very significant campus in the whole UA system. Yes, sir.
What advice do you have for young students these days on, starting out their career and they're looking to the older generation and looking for advice and guidance how they should progress? Have you?
Well, if they're going into engineering, my advice would be to concentrate on the math and the physics. The background courses in math and physics are very important for engineers. It forms the bedrock upon which to build everything.
That's very true. Yes. As a physicist, I have to agree with you.
I thought you would, yeah. we have had a number of students come along who have come from math and physics backgrounds and went into engineering and turned out to be very good engineers due to that kind of background.
It's hard to be a good engineer without a grasp of mathematics.
Exactly.
Well, what do you see for the future of engineering in the space field and your field of control?
Well, control is turning out to be a very ubiquitous technology that's found throughout engineering as well as economics and decision-making everywhere. Control theory is really decision-making, a very sophisticated decision-making theory that allows you to make decisions about missile trajectories, large rocket navigation, guidance, as well as business decisions, economic decisions, and so forth.
Is there still progress being made on that, or has everything been discovered?
Yes, no.
Oh, all right, good.
It is still a very active subject, and we're making new progress here into expanding old ideas into better ideas and introducing new ideas.
Well, what are some of the new thoughts or new concepts?
We're working on a new approach to digital control, which has applications in digital signal processing as well. We're working also in some areas of disturbance accommodation for disturbance inputs in control systems, unexpected inputs, disturbances, things like wind gust in missile navigation, aircraft trying to coexist with wind gust and landing and so forth. So it's a very exciting field, how to build control systems that are smart enough to cope with the disturbances that they're not expecting.
Have you figured out a control system to help the stock market?
I wish. That's been tried by all my friends. Those who've been successful keep quiet about it, and those who have been unsuccessful make a big noise about it. Just won't work. So
I see.
Many friends on the West Coast have tried that, and some of them don't talk about their successes. So I suppose they got something that works.
No, that's an interesting control theory problem.
Yes, very complicated. Yeah.
Well, what else would you like to tell us about today?
Well, I'm open to any suggestions you want to.
How have you enjoyed living in Huntsville?
Oh, it's a fantastic town. It's really, the offerings are fabulous. Remember when I first came here, the talk was, well, the Germans here really want to have more liberal art type entertainment in town. They want a symphony orchestra, they want this and forth. Anything they wanted, more or less, the city tried to give it to them. And thank goodness we had art museums sprout up. We had symphony orchestras, ballet, which made the city much more a cosmopolitan type city.
Other than Rudolf Hermann, did you get to know any of the other Germans well?
Dr. Geisler, Erhard Geisler.
Yes.
He was chairman of guidance and control, later on called aeroballistics, I believe it was. And he was very, very instrumental in funding some of my early research on Chebyshev Minimax control. Who else? The gentleman in avionics. I forget his name. Hauserman, yeah, Dr. Hauserman. Got to know him real well.
Yeah, Hauserman was an important figure in the whole
he was
picture out there.
Very important. Avionics is what made it all work. And I was impressed with the Germans building their scale models of everything, working scale models of everything, even the little small actuators on the Saturn vehicle.
Now, their idea was everything had to be tested.
Yes, that's very, very important.
Didn't believe anything from paper studies.
Well, we didn't have simulations like we do today.
Yeah.
Of course, they had the primitive, by the way, they had the AC type analog computers, not the DC type everybody else was using, but they had the older AC type. They were using them out there very skillfully. I guess they had imported them from Germany. I don't know where they came from, but they were very, very interesting.
What do you see as the future of UAH? What directions does it need to go in that are going to be different?
Well, they're going in good directions now. I hope they can maintain their guidance it's hard to know what area to go into unless you know what the moods of Congress are. Congress can turn on the research money and turn off the research money so quick, and that is such a big factor in what direction people go into. The emphasis now is on research funding on the part of faculty. So if you don't have research funding, you have to go some direction that does have research funding. You have to change your field sometime, change your area. So you have to be versatile in your training.
You mentioned that there were some incidents that involved Rudolph Herman that might be interesting.
Yes, in the late 60s, we were privileged to have an opportunity to have Professor Alex Letov from the USSR Moscow Aviation Institute here, which is one of their top secret aviation institutes in Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. And he was allowed to come to Huntsville finally. We had to jump through a bunch of hoops, as you can imagine, back in those days. Third Army area was always off limits to foreign visitors, but they managed to make some exceptions for Dr. Letov. And he came here looking for, we had met him at other conferences in other venues. And so he came here to visit Huntsville and see what he could learn about the space program. And at one point in time, he toured the campus. He wanted to meet Dr. Herman in the Research Institute. And I didn't know what that was all about. I didn't know how that would work out with the history. I know Dr. Letov had told me one time that he was the air raid warning person on top of one of the buildings in Leningrad during the siege of Leningrad. And so he had some bitter memories of that period of time, and I don't know how that was going to work out. But anyway, the arrangements were made to meet Dr. Herman in his office over the RI building, and so everybody had their fingers crossed it would work out okay. And Dr. Letov walked in Herman's office. We were also in there, and Rudolph, being the classic scholar he always was, he was a classic act. One thing about Dr. Herman that sticks in your memory, that everything he did was classic. It was a really class act. When he met interviewees coming to Huntsville for a job interview, he'd meet them at the airport with a bouquet of roses as he came off the airplane. The old-fashioned airplane, the steps, he would hand them a bouquet of roses. I didn't know what that was all about until I learned out later. That was a typical European way of greeting guests. Nobody ever gave me a bouquet of roses. But anyway, Dr. Herman was there in his office, and he was looking forward to meeting this. He had never met this person before. And when Alex Letov walked in the office, they were both rather stern-faced, not quite sure what was going to happen. And Letov says, "Are you the Dr. Herman that wrote the book on hypersonic inlet diffusers for airplanes?" Dr. Herman said, yeah. And then all of a sudden, the smile broke on both faces, and they shook hands, and the warmth started spreading around. It was just beautiful how that worked out. And within a few minutes, they were in a deep conversation as technologists. People were about his book and certain things in his book that Dr. Letov has used in his own work. And so it was amazing how that technology's come to the surface and sort of broke some ice and warmed up some relationships. And by the time we finished, Dr. Letov was very pleased to have come here and have been able to meet Dr. Herman.
Well, that's a nice story.
He had a large following apparently in the Soviet Union. His books had a large following.
Oh, that's a nice story.
It was very interesting.
You have others?
There's a few others. You were probably there at the funeral, Dr. Herman's funeral.
Yeah, I was at the funeral.
And he had more publications than any administrator I have ever run into, including Purdue. I was at Purdue for 2 or 3 years, and the administrators there were all very accomplished, but none of them had the kind of record that Dr. Herman had. He had something like 200 or 300 publications. And I was really surprised at the funeral service that there had been arrangements made to have a list of his publications ready on part of the speakers who were going to speak at that occasion. And I believe Dr. Thompson, Ken Thompson was one of them, and Dr. Jörg Turnus was another one. They read every single paper, the title of every single paper that Dr. Herman had ever written in his entire life. And so it was a long process, and we all got kind of tired of some of those complicated names of papers he had written. But it was all over with. I thought, wow, what a class act!
Yep.
This was a really a unique person. so I was very touched by that. Everybody else was too.
And they also played some very classical music.
Yes. Dr. Herman was very much
Bruckner and...
yes, yes. I forgot about that. Yes, you're right. And I remember Dr. Herman, when he first retired, he took a world trip. He told me he's going to ski at every ski place he could ski in the world, in Australia and various parts of Europe. He came back from that event and telling me again how much he enjoyed skiing everywhere. I didn't know he was that sturdy a skier, sturdy a person to tolerate all that stress all around the world. And but anyway, he was a very multi-talented individual.
Well, thanks for those stories.
Thank you.
We've covered a lot of territory in this short interview. Surely appreciate you coming in to do it.
Appreciate it.
And
enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck.